Hello, my name's Rebecca Richardson, but most people call me Becky, and today I thought we could go over some TV shows I've finished versus ones I haven't finished and why. This isn't an overly critical video. I'm not very good at being critical, but I'm going to try and be as critical as possible and give reasons other than because I liked it and because I didn't like it. Some of these I do have like very specific reasons, especially the ones that I haven't finished. I have very good reasons why I haven't finished them. Also, I should probably say if any of your favourite TV shows appear on the part of this video where I'm talking about shows I haven't finished, don't be like offended or anything. Everybody has their own opinions on different shows. These ones just didn't really appeal to me. I don't actually watch too much TV to start off with. Recently I found that I watch like no TV. I don't know what it is. It's just I found that TV shows don't really interest me anymore. I have like a few that you'll see on this list that I'm sort of still watching. But other than like outside those few that I already watch, I don't like go looking for new TV shows. I tend to just watch YouTube instead of like actual TV. So yeah, this list is quite short because I'm not like an avid watcher of TV or movies or anything. So yeah, hopefully this shouldn't be too long. So we're going to start with TV shows I have finished, which I'm kind of including TV shows that I have overall finished and also ones that I've watched all of the current seasons available, even if there's still ones to come out. Like, I've watched what's available at the moment. Then I have TV shows I'm yet to finish, which are shows that either are still coming out or have already finished, but there's, like, available seasons that I just haven't watched yet. And then I have the shows that I haven't finished and I don't plan on finishing. So we'll start with TV shows I have finished because this portion of the list is longer. There are 5 on this, and I'm not gonna lie, it took me ages to think of shows I've watched. I had, like, 2 down. And I was just sat for ages like, what else have I actually finished, like, TV-wise? I had to go onto my Netflix account and kind of scroll through things until it, like, jogged my memory. But the first on the list of TV shows I have finished is BBC Merlin. I know Merlin's probably, like, a bit of a throwback. I don't even know how popular Merlin is. I don't see it talked about often. Every now and then I'll see, like, a gif on Tumblr, but it doesn't seem anywhere near as popular as others. But it was really popular, especially in the UK when it first came out. I can't remember the year it began and the year it finished, but I know I was younger because I used to watch it with my grandparents. And it's kind of one of my earliest memories of really enjoying a TV show. I think mainly because of the magic aspect. In fact, I can probably blame Merlin for like making me so interested in a fantasy because that was what I was watching when I was young. One of the things that I always remember from Merlin is the spells, because now I'm aware that when Merlin is like shouting spells at people, there's probably something to it. It's probably like another language or it's based on there must be something there. But when I was little, all I remember is thinking, why is that man screaming nonsense? What's going on? I think I enjoyed the show so much just because it was always easy watching. It was never like hard-hitting Merlin. They had like the odd episode that was like scarier or like used different themes to other ones, but overall it was just like a light-hearted funny show. I thought like the dynamic between Merlin and Arthur was always really funny. They always played that really well, and it was just generally done in a way that was comedic whilst also sticking to the fantasy themes. It's just one of those memories from when I was younger. Like, when I look back on when I was little, I'm like, oh yeah, BBC Merlin, that existed. And yeah, it was just great. I will say one thing I didn't like about Merlin was the ending, but I think that's like a general agreement from everybody who watched it. I believe it was cancelled, so they kind of had to rush the ending. And whereas everybody had been expecting this big ending where Merlin told Arthur that he has magic and all of this, it was like Arthur died, but just beforehand Merlin was like, by the way, I have powers, and then Arthur was just kind of like, and then died. And then suddenly Merlin was like 300 years old being a postman, and it was like, what is going on? That, I will say, wasn't a great ending. I know I'm not the only person who watched that and was like, oh. In fact, I believe that was like what was said when it finished in my house. We were all just like, oh. But other than the ending, if you kind of ignore the ending, it was always a really strong TV show. I also really liked the way that every episode was a different storyline, or like the majority of them were at least. I find a lot of TV shows start with that and then it kind of gets lost and you end up with one really long plot line that takes up like 20 episodes and it gets a bit boring. But I started rewatching some of Merlin with my sister a while ago, and I did just enjoy being back to that format where like obviously you're running like subplots, but every main plot of an episode was different and it was about like a different magical thing or a different ghost or a different like weird fairy or something. It was just something that was just so easy and light-hearted to watch, and you didn't really have to put much thought into it. It wasn't one of those shows that you really had to focus on. It was just nice. It was just something easy to sit down and watch on a night. That being said, going from something that was very easy to watch and didn't take much thought, the next show that I actually have finished is BBC Sherlock. I know there's mixed opinions on Sherlock. I know a lot of fans didn't like the latest series, but personally, there's never been a bad episode as far as I'm concerned. I've loved every episode. I know there isn't many episodes, but out of the ones we have, I've always really enjoyed Sherlock. I think what first drew me to it is the fact that you really have to focus on it. Sometimes I like something that I can just sit and watch in the background, and other times I like something that I really have to like use my brain on. And there was just something quite appealing about Sherlock and the way it worked, and all of the bits where he's talking really fast and he's pointing things out and there's all this description going on, or there's like, he's in like his mind palace and there's things flying around in front of him and all of this like garbled information taking place. And I don't know, I just found that quite fun and exciting because I had like no idea what he was talking about most of the time, but I enjoyed trying to follow him and trying to work out what was going on. I also thought the plot of each episode was really good. It was always something unexpected, but you could still eventually work it out. Like, it wasn't like unexpected, like, well, none of that was set up, you've just like thrown some random plot twist in. It was when you look back at it, you were like, oh my god, yeah, that makes sense. But it just took a while to get there. Again, it was one of those shows that also had humour in it, even if it was like a slightly different humour to Merlin. But the interactions between Sherlock and John I really enjoyed. And also just Sherlock as a character, I thought Benedict Cumberbatch played him really well. I've never actually read the originals, and I haven't even seen the Sherlock movies, but from what I get from their characters, and from what I've seen other people say, that they do put a good spin on them, but they keep them like true at the same time. See, as much as I wouldn't say Sherlock is like one of like my all-time favourite TV shows, it is something I really enjoyed, and it is one of the only things I can rewatch. I struggle to like rewatch anything the same way I struggle to reread things, but I do find I can sit and like watch an episode of Sherlock. I rewatched the entire thing with my mum when she started watching it, which I suppose isn't too hard because like I said, there's not that many episodes, but it is one of those things that I can watch over and over because every time you watch it, I find you either realise something new or there's things in there that you like forgot about first time. I've always like kind of admired the writers of Sherlock to be able to write stories like that and these kind of mysteries that are also very carefully wound together. And that's always the sort of thing that I think takes so much time plotting. Like, you must have to put so much time into working out every section of a plot to make sure it all fits together the way those episodes do. And it was always something that I would watch and be like, wouldn't it be great if you could write like that? And it just makes for a really entertaining TV show. Number 3 on my list of 5 TV shows I have finished is Stranger Things. Obviously Stranger Things hasn't finished yet, but like I said, I'm referring to the available seasons, and as of filming this, Stranger Things season 3 is not out yet. I think it comes out in like a few days. Stranger Things has been one of those shows that like basically everybody and their neighbour's dog has been interested in, and I do think this comes down to a lot of different factors. For instance, one thing that my mum really likes about it is the fact that it's set in the 80s, and every time like different music plays, she's like, oh my god, this sounds so 80s, or oh my god, yeah, I remember those hairstyles. Like, I do think that people from that time do like see it as very nostalgic, whereas obviously I wasn't around in the 80s, so the thing that I've always found appealing about Stranger Things is like the monsters and the general storyline. Stranger Things is definitely a show I watch for the visuals. I think if it was less full on and there wasn't so much happening all the time, I probably wouldn't find it as interesting as I do. You know, I do find myself kind of waiting and looking out for when like the monsters are going to start appearing and when all the action's going to take up, instead of like focusing on the little things. What I've always found funny about Stranger Things though is that when season 1 came out, everyone was like, it's so scary. Like, I can remember people talking to me who'd already watched it and being like, you need to watch this new show, it's like really creepy and scary. And I was like a bit like daunted about watching it because so many people have been like, oh, it's like terrifying. And then I watched episode 1 and was like, yeah, it's a bit scary, but it's not like terrifying. And I do think where they maybe attempted to make it like really creepy at the beginning, they've kind of like dropped that a little bit and focused more on the action of it and like the general plot line instead of giving it that freaky vibe, which I like because I'm not a fan of scary things. So I'm like, yeah, that's fine for me, just drop that, that's great. I will say about Stranger Things, I've never really felt connected to any of the characters particularly. I like them as characters, but there's nobody in it that I find like relatable, which is something that I tend to look for more in books than TV, but still like in TV as well. And as much as I like all the characters, and I don't think I can name one character that I'm supposed to like that I don't like, which is great, there isn't any particularly that I can relate to. Whether that's because they're all younger and they're all kind of like kids, especially in season 1 and 2, I don't really know. But overall, like for most people, Stranger Things is just this show that everybody seems to enjoy. I don't know whether it's because it's like very mainstream, so everybody's trying to like keep up with what's happening, or whether it's because it genuinely is good, which I think it is. I love the action scenes in it, like I said. I love all of the big monsters and the CGI used in it. It's just one of those where like it's not a favourite, like I don't avidly take part in the fandom or anything, but I do really enjoy watching it, and it's one of those that I think is so easy to binge because it's always like on some sort of cliffhanger or there's something big about to happen. And I do think it's that kind of fast pace that keeps people watching it and just makes it like a generally entertaining thing to watch. Next on my list of TV shows I have finished is The Umbrella Academy. This is like a relatively new TV show, so there's only been one season so far, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I will say at the beginning, I didn't know if I was going to finish it. I kind of went into it just because I knew that Gerard Way had wrote it, and I was like massive into My Chemical Romance back in the day, and I kind of went into it on that purpose. In the first few episodes, I was like, yeah, it's alright, but it's so difficult for a TV show to actually grab me and keep me there. And I didn't know if I was going to continue with it. I sort of watched a few episodes and then, like, didn't watch it for a while. But then when I got back into it, I did really enjoy it. I think one thing about The Umbrella Academy is that, it has this vibe that I can't particularly explain. Like, it's not like a Lemony Snicket-esque vibe, but it's not like super serious either. I kind of think of it a bit like Good Omens, which I've only watched one episode, but from that one episode, it kind of has that like weird in-betweeny vibe where like it feels lighthearted, but then there's like not lighthearted things happening. I love the focus on all the different characters in Umbrella Academy. I think that it was quite nice to see some of it so focused on the characters. There were some character choices that I wasn't a big fan of and I wasn't interested in like at all, but overall a lot of it I thought was done really well. I am looking forward to season 2 for seeing more of these characters' backstories, especially Klaus. I feel like a lot was opened up for Klaus and then we never really heard anything else of it kind of thing, so I'm hoping that's all picked up. And also Vanya, although she's definitely not one of my favourites, and I don't just mean because she nearly caused the end of the world, like she kind of bothered me throughout, but there definitely isn't one character that like I don't care about as much. Okay, maybe it's who's the big guy in it, I can't even remember his name, the big guy, what's his name? What's he called? Is he number 1 or is he number 2? The big guy with the hairy chest. You know who I'm talking about, that guy. He definitely didn't interest me, like, at all. He was the one that I was like, yeah, you're cool and stuff, but you're also super annoying. So I'd say he's, like, the one out of the main ones that I don't particularly care too much about, but every other character had something going for them that I was really interested to see more of. I also thought the way the show was, like, generally plotted worked really well with this kind of idea that from the beginning, you knew they were working towards the end of the world, like that was coming. And I quite like it when they do that in TV shows where you sort of know how it's going to end, but you're sort of finding out how they're going to get there, especially with 5 kind of knowing this and just being very aware like, hey, the world's ending, and us getting to see flashbacks to him actually after like the world has ended technically kind of added that extra aspect of it, because you were then looking at him in the end of the world and being like, well, we know that's what's coming. We know that's gonna, like, happen, but how are we going to get there? And I don't think at the beginning anybody was expecting Vanya to actually be that catalyst. I will say it was spoiled for me. I saw some GIFs on Tumblr and I was like, oh, okay, so it's Vanya. But before then, I had absolutely no idea, and I think being able to look at it and go through it and think it's going to be that person or it's going to be that person or this person's going to do that is a really good way to then build up to that plot twist at the very end. I just think shows like that where there's almost a sense of dramatic irony, where the watcher knows something that the people actually in the show don't know, always works. Another example is Final Destination. I've only watched one of them and I do plan on watching the others, but an aspect I really like about those is the fact that you know they're going to die, they don't know they're going to die, and then you get to just watch them do things and work out how they're going to die. And Umbrella Academy has that same effect in the way of, you know, the end of the world is coming, but you just don't know how it's going to happen, and the people in it don't know that it's going to happen either. I also love the use of music in this show. I think one of the things that really hooked me, like the first episode, as much as the next few episodes I was a bit meh on, the first episode I really liked because of the use of music. Like, the use of kind of slightly older now pop music in really unnecessary scenes. Like every fight scene that 5 has, it's always to some song that should not be played in a fight scene, and I absolutely love that. Like, it just gives it that like comic feel, but at the same time he's like stabbing a man. To be fair, in general it was quite funny for me because the guy who plays 5 is in a show on Nickelodeon that my sister watches. I was watching one particular episode, I think it was the fight in the diner, and as Five like jams a knife into this guy's eye, my sister comes through the door and is like, he's on Nicky, Ricky, Jicky and Dawn. It was just the best timing. But I do think it was a good move to take this like kid and then put him in these ridiculous fight scenes with even more ridiculous music. It did keep it dark, but it was also really funny to watch, and I do think that's something that should be done more often, because it's like just a different way of going about it. Instead of having like super serious music for this super serious scene, it like makes everything feel funny, which is what I mean by that kind of like in-betweeny vibe where like it's not dark but like it is dark, but at the same time it doesn't feel dark because of everything else about it, like the music and like the sound effects and all of these other things that are happening at the same time. That's definitely what hooked me to the show, and I will say it was that same sort of humour that kept me watching the show. I think if it had been done in a way where everything was just supposed to be really serious, I probably wouldn't have liked it as much, but having those comedic aspects, like the use of the music and the fact that Five is a child and the fact that Klaus dresses so bizarrely and speaks so bizarrely, I think he's like everybody's favourite because of that. And it was just things like that, those kind of like funny things and the light-hearted feel to it that made it that little bit different to other shows like it. So that is the end of all of the shows I have finished. I'd say that's like the lesser interesting bit because they're just shows I can compliment, whereas now we're getting into the ones that I have differing opinions on that may in some terms be controversial. First is the shows I'm yet to finish. There are only 2 on this, and the first one is Killing Eve. Honestly, there isn't really a good reason I haven't finished Killing Eve. I adored season 1. I thought it was done so well. I love assassins. I love female assassin characters. I think one of the reasons I loved it so much is that I was like, maybe I was reading Empire of Storms when I was watching Killing Eve, and I was like, it's another blonde assassin lady, and I just love that. Again, it's another one of those shows though that's dark but kind of has that light feel to it, so like she's killing people but you're kind of like laughing about it while she's murdering all these people. And I thought that just every main character involved in it was just really like funny but also well thought through, and you kind of understood their motives. I was a bit concerned going into it that it would feel a bit too much like a cop drama, because when I'd like seen all of the advertisements for it on BBC, it did kind of just look like another like run-of-the-mill like cop drama, which they make so many of. Everything on BBC at the moment is a crime drama. My mum was like, oh, I should watch that because she really likes that kind of thing, and I was like, yeah. But then I saw that people were like raving about it, and I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. And it was just not at all what I'd expected it to be. Like, is that kind of the same as saying you shouldn't judge a book by its cover? Like, don't judge a TV show by its advert. I don't know. Even though you're supposed to judge them by the advert, that's why adverts exist. But one thing I will say though that I found really like mind messing was watching the show and then hearing Jodie Comer talk in an interview. I can't remember what show. I think she was on the Graham Norton show, and she just started speaking, and everybody in my house was like, what? It was just really funny. So I do think going into season 2 now, I'm going to be very aware. Like, I knew that she doesn't actually speak with a Russian accent in real life. I just assume every like English actor has a posh accent. So when she didn't have a posh accent, I was like, oh my god. And I do think I'll be very aware of that in the back of my mind when I'm watching it, and it'll just be like an extra funny thing that I'm thinking about. But I will definitely be finishing Killing Eve at some point. It is out now. It came out about a week ago in the UK. I am planning on sitting and just binging it at some point. I just don't have any time at the moment, but that is literally the only reason why I haven't yet finished Killing Eve or caught up with Killing Eve, just because I haven't had time. But I will, because I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I don't have any other reason why I haven't watched it yet. The other show, however, on my yet to finish list is Supernatural. At this point, I think everybody has heard of Supernatural. It's been around since about 2005. It's just been on forever, and that's basically the reason why I haven't finished it yet. I've been watching Supernatural for years. I can't remember what season they were on when I started watching it. It might have been like 7 or 8-ish, but I had to do some catching up, and then it kind of got like worse as time went on. The first 5 seasons, I'd say, were brilliant. I loved them. I'm currently rewatching season 1 with my friend because she's never watched it before, and I'm just like remembering all of the things that I originally loved about it so much. I must have rewatched the first season quite a few times now because I like know every episode in that season 1. But as time went on, it just kind of like lost its like mojo, I think. I don't know whether it was a change in writer. I know that one of the seasons in particular that was horrific, I believe, had a different writer. I'd say my least favourite 2 seasons were 10 and 11. 10 just because I've never been a big Dean fan and it was very Dean focused, and then 11 was just bad. Like, I think, but that seems to be like a mutual agreement. I don't even think that's like a controversial opinion. I think everybody who watches Supernatural agrees that season 11 was just bad. There wasn't really a villain. There was a villain. She was like God's sister, but she was also Dean's love interest. So it was just really weird. She didn't really feel like a villain. And then she never got defeated. She just like walked hand in hand with God, like into the horizon or whatever. And it just like, the entire season just felt bad and just really crap. And they kind of lost the humour in it as well. Thankfully, I do think that the writers heard everybody complaining about this, because season 12 felt a lot more like the original season. And I think what was so good about the original seasons is, again, they kind of had that different plot per episode sort of thing. But it was also really funny at the same time, and you really connected with the characters. And as the show went on, it just lost that, and it got more and more ridiculous, and that is why I haven't finished it. Basically, it's been going on so long now that, like, they could turn around to the next season and be like, but guess what? The devil has a cousin, and you'd just be like, yeah, right. That, at this point, yeah, that seems possible, because it just feels like they're really grasping at straws, trying to come up with things to do. I do think season 15 is going to be the last one, and as much as I've always been a fan of this show, I am glad that it's ending, because it just doesn't need to go on any longer. Like, quit while you're ahead kind of thing. So I will definitely watch seasons like 13 and 14, which I think are out at the moment. It's just a case of getting around to it. I did watch the first like 3 episodes of season 13 and just couldn't be bothered with it, because it's just been going on for so long. I was like, no. But I've had quite a lot of time away from it, so I do think now watching season 1, it's making me want to go back to it, so I will at some point finish it, because I was so obsessed with it back in the day. I had a cardboard cutout of Sam Winchester in my bedroom. I just owe it to like my younger self, I think, to finish watching Supernatural. But I do think it's a very good example of letting something go on for far too long. Finally, we're on to my did not finish list, which is 3 TV shows that I haven't finished and I do not plan on finishing. I've just kind of like DNF'd them. We're like, no, we don't need that anymore. So I'm gonna go with these like in order, I think, of like how I stopped finishing them. So the first on this list is The Vampire Diaries. Again, I think this is another one that like everybody knows about The Vampire Diaries, and it's another one that when it first started, I really enjoyed it. I'd say the first few seasons, again, like Supernatural, I thought were the best seasons, and I liked them more. And then again, like Supernatural, as it went on, it just got stupid. I stopped watching, like, either like halfway through season 7 or at the beginning of season 7 or like at the beginning of season 8, I can't quite remember. This storyline was just getting ridiculous. We hit a point where like suddenly somebody was like miraculously pregnant, and then it was just like, the entire thing was weird. There was like odd flashbacks happening, and it just felt like they were really stretching to get a storyline out of it. I just couldn't be bothered with having to deal with that, and just like weird writing decisions that didn't need to happen. Again, I loved the earlier seasons. I thought the characters were really great, other than Elena. I've never been an Elena fan. I think she's possibly one of the most annoying TV characters I've ever come across, especially from like season 4 onward. And I did actually think when she like disappeared that I'd maybe start enjoying the show again, but I didn't, because it turned out that the plot was also another reason why I wasn't enjoying it. But I'd say what makes this different to the situation with Supernatural is that Supernatural is a show that I was really obsessed with. There's characters in it that I just love so much, and I owe it to myself to finish it. There's a lot I owe to those characters. The Vampire Diaries, there isn't any character that I connected to on that level. I think my favourite was probably Damon, just because I thought he was funny, and the best scenes in the entire show were definitely just any time when he was like laid on the road in front of some car, and then there was just like rock music playing while people died. Like, that's when I think back on Vampire Diaries, I think of Damon killing people. That's like all I really remember of it now. Because there wasn't any characters that I particularly connected to, I don't feel like I have to finish it. I don't owe it to my younger self to finish the Vampire Diaries. I just stopped watching it and was like, no, I'm not interested in this anymore, because it was just getting far out of hand. Like, it should have stopped a while ago. So that's why this is on the will not finish list, and Supernatural is on the yet to finish list, because I don't owe it to myself, and there's no part of me that wants to sit and finish the Vampire Diaries. Next on this list is Riverdale. Riverdale, I adored season 1. I thought season 1 was great. I thought the murder mystery to it was brilliant. I've never read the comics, so I can't really have an opinion on that. I know most of the comic fans hate it. I have a friend who's a comic fan who like despises the TV show. I didn't even really know it was a comic until like halfway through season 1, but I really enjoyed that first season. I thought it kept you on your toes. You were constantly like, oh, it was this person who was the killer, or oh, this person was the killer. I really like that. Just a very simple plot where everything's not completely mad. You're just trying to work out who done it. It's just easy to follow, but it's also interesting to follow. It was also very plot driven, and there was parts of it that felt like spooky as well, which I liked. And It made it entertaining to watch. I found that the characters felt more authentic in season 1. I kind of liked them more. There was characters in season 1 that I ended up not liking in season 2. I do just think that it was one of those shows where if they just ended it after season 1, I would have been happy because it was a really good season and it should have just ended there. But they didn't. They continued making seasons and it just got worse. Season 2, I think, was quite possibly the worst season because the entire thing was just like a bit of a mess. I liked the main plot line with trying to work out who the new killer was, but it was all just like a bit all over the place and it was character driven but in the wrong way. So instead of focusing on the plot, it was like the plot was a subplot and the main plot was like all of these different romances that were happening. It got to a point by season 3 where I was fast forwarding scenes because it just felt like every episode, every 10 minutes, somebody would be snogging someone else. And I was like, I just don't care. Just tell me who the goddamn killer is. It just never seemed to end. Even my mum reached a point, because we watched it together, where as soon as like they started making out, we'd both just be like, oh, for God's sake. Because it just happened all the time. I do think the writers forgot how old the characters are supposed to be as well. I think they're all supposed to be like 16, 17. And they are definitely not written like 16, 17-year-olds. You know, you had like Betty pole dancing for a group of adults who were like, yeah, woo, like what was that about? And like Veronica just sits around drinking like whiskey or something on a day-to-day life and she owns like a gambling den or something now. And I was like, what is going on? She's just like investing in all of these places, which just you can't do when you're like 16, 17. You can't have that. I know that it's like fiction, but it just felt stupid. But I felt that kind of vibe did carry into the main plot as well, where everything just started to feel ridiculous and just like, it hit a point where I was watching certain scenes and I was either cringing or I was just like, why? Why is this a thing? It was like some scenes were almost laughable. I just gave up on it in the end. I just couldn't sit through any more of it. It started off seeming like it was going to be a really good show and that it was quite serious, but then it just kind of massively went downhill and just got more and more ridiculous as the episodes went on. I do definitely think that now Riverdale is a show maybe for like younger teenagers who are just like sitting around for something like lighthearted, because as like a mystery TV show or like even like a slightly like horror TV show, it doesn't really hold up to the standards you expect to see, just because the writing is so bizarre and the characters are so unrealistic and the plot lines are just getting out of hand. Even though they're only 3 seasons in, like if we're on season 3 now and it's out of hand, what's it going to be like if it does a Supernatural and pulls 15 seasons? Like, what's going to happen then? I'd say about like a few episodes into season 3, I just gave up. But another thing about it was that I thought all the characters became really unlikable. So season 1, I kind of liked most of them. I've never been a Veronica fan and I've never been like overly an Archie fan, but I could kind of like deal with all of them. I really liked Jughead, and then every character became unlikable. Like they just got worse. Season 1, I thought Jughead was really relatable for me, and I like really liked him as a character. By the beginning of season 3, I was like, oh my god, shut up, please. And it was the same with Archie. Archie's storyline just went proper weird and out the window. Veronica became 10 times more annoying than she needed to be. I think Betty was the only character that I could kind of deal with, and I sort of understood her motives, but even she was beginning to get on my nerves. And I do think it was just a case of season 1 should have just been it. They should have just stopped there because it would have stood on its own quite well, I think. And they just continued with it and everything just went downhill. And yeah, I don't plan on finishing Riverdale. The last TV show on the list of shows I will not be finishing is Shadowhunters. Disclaimer, I'm a Mortal Instruments fan. However, like most people, I don't dislike the show because I'm a book fan. That's like a whole thing I could do another video on, as somebody uses Tumblr a lot, this like weird war between book fans and show fans, which I think is just so unnecessary. Like, why can't we all just calm down and let people enjoy what they want to enjoy? That's not the reason I don't like the show. I think people assume because I'm a fan of the books that I hate the show because it's different to the books. However, I didn't enjoy the show just because I thought it was really badly written. I got through season 1 just because I'm a fan of the books and I was really excited about the TV show and I wanted to enjoy it. And as far as, like, I think season 1 was the worst season, but I kind of dragged myself through it because I was like, it's gonna get better, it's gonna get better. It didn't. I'd say the one episode I enjoyed in season 1 was the Malik episode, just because that wedding scene was iconic, but it took me time to get through it. And then season 2 came along and I did actually think season 2 was better. It felt more professional. Season 1 felt really unprofessional. The lighting was weird. Clary had like neon orange hair. None of them could act particularly well. Like, it just felt badly done. But season 2 felt a lot more professional. Everything just seemed to improve, and I thought it was like an up point and it was going to get great. And even the things that changed, because that's another thing, I think people assume as a book fan, because they've changed things, I won't like it, but I'm okay with changes, because I think for a TV show, because it's such a different format to a book, you have to change things. And there were little things that they changed that I was like, yeah, cool, that's fine. But then there's writing decisions that I did find myself comparing to the books, and I just couldn't stand by them, not because they're different from the book, but because they were different from the book and just bad. Just bad choices. The first one of these that came along was the whole Raphael and Isabel relationship. For a start, let's just start by saying Rafael Santiago is supposed to be asexual and aromantic. Obviously that went out the window. And also the fact that the entire thing was just the most ridiculous relationship I think I've ever seen in a TV show. Basically, they brought in this Yin Fen storyline, which is an Infernal Devices storyline. And when it first came up, I was really excited to see where it came when Isabel was like, had this like, sort of like ointment thing. And the guy was like, yeah, you should put that on yourself. And then it was like, it's a Yin Fen. And I like nearly choked on my drink. Then it just got ridiculous when they brought in this relationship aspect of it. And suddenly they were both addicts who were like using each other. And the entire thing was just like really toxic. Like, I don't use that word very often. I'm not someone to be like, that's a toxic relationship, but oh my god, it was so bad. I do think part of my dislike from that point on was amplified by some of the fans I saw, and I don't really like the fan base in general, but I was in a lot of Facebook groups at the time, and the people on these Facebook groups were like actually horrific to be around. There was one lass who stalked me online because I said I didn't like Clary in the show. She like stalked me through all of these groups and would tell the people like who ran these groups to get rid of me because I didn't like Clary. Like, they were not nice people. So I do think seeing all these people being like, oh my god, they're great, I love Raphael and Izzy so much, just like made everything 10 times worse. But I didn't give up after that. As far as Shadowhunters goes, there were like little things that built up to me eventually going, no. Next of those, I would say, is probably Clary and Jace. They bothered me from the beginning. I will say I'm not a Clace fan, like, in the books either. Like, I don't dislike them, but I don't, like, ship them. Like, I just don't care. Like, I was never bothered whether they were together or not. I was like, okay, you, like, you know, you do you kind of thing. I'm not that bothered. But in the show, they were actually annoying. I think what it was is they took Jace's character and they took away the one thing that made him likeable as far as I'm concerned. Again, I'm not a fan of the usual male protagonist who's like buff and really rude to everybody, but he gets away with it because he's got a six-pack and like daddy issues. And the one thing that I liked about Jace Herondale was that he was funny and he had all of these like one-liners, and that was kind of the one thing that stopped me from just like not caring less about his existence. But they managed to get rid of that somehow in the show. They'd give him the lines. I think this is the one point that wasn't a writing thing. I genuinely think this was an acting thing, because they would give him the lines and then they'd just be delivered badly. There was so many situations where I'd see a scene building up and I was like, here we go, we're going to have one of those iconic Jace lines. And then he'd say it, but he'd just say it, like, really flat. And I was like, okay, you failed. And it just made Jace's character seem really boring and flat. And then I thought Clary was annoying. I found her very whiny. I thought she kind of showed up and just made everybody else feel bad. And yeah, I just didn't like her as a character. And then the two of them had no chemistry. And I could sort of deal with this throughout the beginning. And then as time went on, it just started to get on my nerves more and more. And it hit a point where I was just like, I just really don't want you here. Like, I very nearly started fast forwarding their scenes as well. I was like, I think the like cherry on top of the cake was that like glowy scene where they were like glowing and like looking at each other, and it was like physically made me cringe. That was when I started to like really get sick of that. However, again, didn't stop me watching the show. Next is sort of a little thing I had with it, which this I will say is entirely because it was different to the books. This is the one point that was just a book thing and is a really stupid thing that I shouldn't care about as much as I do. However, I do, and that is that they gave German American accent, which I know sounds so stupid and that shouldn't be a reason why I'd be like, I stopped watching it because they gave German American accent. But Jem Carstairs is like one of my favourite characters, and I was like so ready for him to be in it. I was like, yes, Jem's gonna show up, Brother Zachariah is here, can't wait. And then he opened his mouth and this American accent came out of it, and I was like, oh. That's one point I will say that is just entirely me being petty because it was different to the character in the book, and I'm aware of that. I think the thing that got me about it though is that nobody was mentioning it online. Everybody was like, Jem's here, he's great. And when I was like, why is he American? All of the answers genuinely, from Americans, was that he has an American accent because he's a silent brother and silent brothers don't have accents. And like, I don't know who's going to be the person to tell these people that Americans also have accents, like every other person on the face of the planet. I don't know where this idea came from, that their accent is the one accent. That's like me saying my accent is. I think it's because you don't hear your own accent. So like, I don't listen to myself speak and think, oh yeah, there's my British accent or whatever. It was just really funny to me that people were like, of course he has an American accent because silent brothers don't have accents, and an American accent isn't an accent, as if it's like the OG accent. And I was just like, I can't. However, again, didn't stop me watching the show. The next point, however, did. And this is the biggest issue I had with this, and this is what I mean about it being from a writing perspective, and that is Sebastian's character. Sebastian Morgenstern is one of my favourite villains ever because he was horrible, but I still cried when he died. And I think being able to make a character like that is so difficult because he was horrible, obviously. He was like the worst. But because of his backstory and the way everything came to be with him, you still felt bad for him. You actually had sympathy for him because he was a victim of Valentine like everybody else had been. Sebastian was who he was because Valentine had made him that way, and that's why it was so sad when he died, because the entire book you were like, this guy's horrible, but in the back of your head you were still thinking, but that's not his fault, that's not how he was made to be. There's like a boy in there who's had his life taken from him, and you saw that when he died, and there was that moment where he was himself again, and I like actually cried. And I think it's such a difficult character to build who's that level of three-dimensional, where you hate them but you also feel really bad for them. And somehow in the show they actually managed to like get rid of all of that. I don't know how they did it. They were handed a character who was already written brilliantly for them, and then they just somehow went, no, we don't need that, got rid of it, and instead they had this like weird barbecued sausage demon thing going on where it was like Will Tudor, but it wasn't Will Tudor. He actually had the skin of this like weird like meaty burnt thing that looks like leftover barbecue, and it just like completely got rid of his entire character. It's like they took a character who was really like brilliantly written, and then they just went, we don't need any of that, we're gonna just turn him into every other average demon you see in a TV show like this. That was like the last straw for me. I got through like the whole first season that had Sebastian in, but then we got to the bit that was like, we got rid of Will Tudor, we brought in this new guy, also his name's not Sebastian anymore, you've got to call him Jonathan. And when I say that, I mean like, if I called him Sebastian in front of anybody who watches the show, they would shout at me for calling him Sebastian and not Jonathan. And at that point I was like, nah, it's not worth my time anymore. And that was when I eventually stopped watching Shadowhunters. I don't know what happened after that. I do know it was cancelled. I have seen one gif, I think, of one of the final episodes, and they like crimped Clary's hair, and I was like, what? Yeah, I've had no interaction with the fandom since. But yeah, that's why I stopped watching Shadowhunters. That went on for longer because I have a lot of feelings about that TV show, but that was a bit of a rant. I didn't mean to rant, I'm so sorry. But yes, that is TV shows I have finished versus TV shows I haven't finished and why. I do find that throughout there is a recurring pattern, and that is that shows I do enjoy are kind of comedic and lighthearted whilst also having really engaging plot lines, and the shows I haven't finished is either because the writing was terrible or because the writing was terrible and it went on for too long. That tends to be the general vibe. I don't think I'm the kind of person who can continue watching a show just because I like the characters. I have to enjoy everything else about it as well. And if you don't have that strong writing and you don't have the plot there, then the entire thing falls apart. But yeah, that's it for this video. Sorry I ranted for so long at the end there, but I promise I'm done. I promise that's it. We kind of opened a can of worms and then it all came out, and then I'm just gonna put the lid back on it and we're all gonna have a nice time. But yeah, that's the end of that. So thank you for watching. Please comment below your opinions on these TV shows. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye!